Right. I want to thank everybody for jumping on here. We have two great sessions tonight. The first one is for the first hour is going to be a really interesting one. We actually had a meeting earlier this week, and it was a very great 30-minute, could have gone an hour or an hour and a half discussion about some really live issues on women's development in Canada and the integration of the women's field game and women's box and how we do that. And not even just X's and O's, but a little bit of a bigger discussion. And then in an hour at 9 Eastern, we have a good friend of mine, Brodie Merrill, jumping on. Wendy will have to clarify with me because I think Erica couldn't jump on, but I'm not 100% sure if she was able to in the end. So we'll clarify in a minute. But let's focus on our first session. We have two great speakers tonight, Ashley Bull and Sarah Orr. Or Sarah Lehman, or use
so
both.
many names.
With so many names. I'm going to let you both introduce yourself a little bit of your background, and then we can jump right into our session if that works. Ashley, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Bull. I'm from BC, so I'm the BC kind of person on this call. I have been in lacrosse since as long as I can remember, but I grew up playing box lacrosse, so that's why this topic's really exciting for me. That's how my whole lacrosse career started. Very few, if any, female players playing when I grew up. I'm in my late 20s, so that's kind of saying a lot for lacrosse where it is now. But I grew up playing box lacrosse, transitioned to field, and I actually played alongside with Sarah at the U19 2011 World Cup for U19 Team Canada. From there, played Division I lacrosse at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York. And then after that, came back and I've been coaching since. And I am currently the program head coach for the Team BC women's program for field lacrosse. So that's kind of my background. Go ahead, Sarah.
All right. My name is Sarah. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. I live just outside Edmonton. And I grew up playing box lacrosse here as well. I grew up watching my dad and fell in love with the box game, and my family moved out to Ontario, and that's where I was introduced to field for the first time. So I played out in Oshawa with the Blue Knights, and then played with Ash for Team Canada, and I ended up going to school at Limestone. Once I graduated, I did a year out in England, and I got to coach lacrosse out there, which was really cool. And I've been back in Alberta since coaching. I coach everything from grassroots to the provincial program I coached last year. So.
Okay, perfect. I think we could jump right into it, and I'm going to let you girls obviously lead the session. Nobody wants to hear my voice on this, but it's a really live issue talking about, I have a 13-year-old daughter who loves playing lacrosse, and of course, you get to a concerned age now where, what are the opportunities if she's played only box? How can we bridge that gap? What are some ways to do that? I'm going to let you two take it. And as questions come in, I'll tell everybody on the call, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. I will get to them kind of when we have a proper break, so we can jump in on them, or you can direct message me and then I'll bring them up. All right, ladies, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Okay. I think kind of for starting this, what we want to do is keep this as conversational as we can. We'll talk about a couple topics, but I think we'll just kind of start with the main thing with what Russ just said. It's how to keep females involved in lacrosse, and I think how to make women's field more appealing to those who have jumped in on the box side. Because I think with box lacrosse, it's so much about how growing up, that's what you can access. That's what everyone's playing. That's where the numbers are, whether you're male or female, that's where you're going to play lacrosse. So I think we'll just kind of start there, if that is a good starting point for you. Okay. And I think that kind of goes back to our own personal experiences, because I know growing up playing box lacrosse for me, I didn't get to go on a female team until I think I was about 13 or 14. That's when they first kind of starting getting box lacrosse for females. So I was with the males all the way up until then. And then that's kind of where also you get the growth spurt. So if you don't grow and you don't have all that muscle mass, you kind of start to become a little bit of a target. But the process for us here in BC it's been about keeping a stick in your hand. It's about keeping the interest in lacrosse, no matter what, and however that comes, whether that be with box or field. But in regards to keeping the females involved and then growing those numbers and getting them involved in the field lacrosse portion, that's that issue. And that's where the numbers are dropping. So some of the things I think that we should talk about is what we're doing to keep those box players involved in playing lacrosse and then eventually getting them excited about field. So I don't know if you got anything to start with on your side there.
Yeah, for sure. Where I'm from here in Alberta, like it is, everyone plays box. Unfortunately, our field and our box seasons also conflict a little bit at the beginning of our field season here. So it is really hard to get females playing lacrosse. And the feedback that we always get is exactly the same as the way I felt. I grew up playing box. I had a pocket in my stick, and I left my first field practice and I was like, I know how to play lacrosse, and like that stick really sucked. And that's a problem that we have here. I work at a sport academy school. It's a public alternative sports school, but we do have a lacrosse program, and we teach both field and box. And most of our new players coming in have never experienced field. So the fall is always really, really hard. And it's hard to get people to enjoy the sport when they're not very successful in it. So that's a huge struggle for us here. The stick is the big difference. We talked a lot about on our planning meeting how a lot of the skills are quite transferable now. Last week's session with the U20 coaches was fantastic, and they talked a lot about how a lot of the field offense now is starting to incorporate a lot of these box concepts. So keeping that field stick in girls' hands is really important to get them comfortable with that stick, because they know how to play lacrosse, but they need to. They're lucky now. Like when I started playing, it was a little leather tennis racket. There's a lot of really great options. So if we can start girls off with those sticks, they are a lot more comfortable doing that. We here at BIMI, like we teach field and we go into box, but we keep like a hybrid day every week, and we run the same practice as box lacrosse just with our field sticks. So it's a way that we keep the field lacrosse going all year round. They do everything that the boys on the other side are doing. So all of the two-man stuff, like the fast break drills, defending, everything is very similar. We learn it just with our field sticks, and they really, really enjoy that. And then by the time we get out to the spring, they have like 5 months with their box stick in their hands at that point. I mean, their field stick. And the spring always goes a lot better for us. Like the stick is a huge problem, and the no contact. That's another piece that we always get here is I like cross-checking people, and I don't like the field stick. That's what we battle a lot here.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it too, though. The sticks nowadays, the technology with a stick is huge. Like take the gate stick, for example, like you have a pocket that you can use, which is nice. Like it's enough of a pocket that you have that sense of the familiarity of a box stick, I would say. I've grabbed some of these girls' sticks at practice, and the hold on them is insane. It's night and day from what we grew up with. But the big thing, I think, especially keeping women interested in the field game, is the fact that box concepts are transitioning into the field game, and it looks awesome. Like the stick skills and the finesse that you need for a women's stick, when that can get applied to field lacrosse because you're using box concepts, it just to a T looks so good. But the hybrid days, I think, is something a lot of coaches should kind of just tuck into their back arsenal, just to have a day at box lacrosse where you can bring in a field stick or bring in a couple field sticks, have people play with them. like you're learning, like you're still doing the concepts of box lacrosse. You're just changing a little bit about how your hands are holding the stick, how you're cushioning the ball. There's a difference between the shorter cradle to the higher, more exaggerated cradle. Like there's all these different things between the games, yet they mesh so well together. And once you put concepts from box into field, now you're meshing the game and it's not so separate anymore. So obviously, yes, there's no cross checking, and that's something that you're just going to have to get over. So if you want to go out and cross check, unfortunately, I don't think field lacrosse is going to be for you. But the fact that lacrosse is so fast paced with the implementation of like a shot clock, I don't know if that's a word, that can be a word today, but putting the shot clock into the field game, that's mimicking the box game. Having the sixes coming in now, that's basically box lacrosse on a field. Like it's just, they're meshing so well that when you like one game, if it's box lacrosse, you're gonna like field. And if you like field, especially the way it's being played now, you're gonna like box. And this is just the way you can keep the stick in your hand year round and have some sort of challenge with, if you're a box player, challenge yourself and play field. If you're a field player, challenge yourself and play some box. So yeah, back to that hybrid point. I mean, that's something that when you said that, I was like, yeah, I'm taking that back. Big time taking that back and putting that in. If the girls can play box,
love it.
Yeah, the girls can play box in the middle of field season or just put the box stick back in their hands for a bit. Like that's exciting for them. So I'm excited to bring that one back to them.
Yeah. The other piece too that I find, for most girls that I coach here, it takes about a season for them to really fall in love with the field game, and they need to play like proper games and get that experience. And so something that we struggle with here in Alberta, we have really low numbers and we don't have much of a proper league. We go and we basically like sticks in the middle, and whoever shows up to the field day, we split up into as even teams as we can. So most of our girls that actually get the opportunity to go, and like we have to get on a plane and we have to leave the province right now, and that's kind of just our reality, but they come back and they love field lacrosse and they get to see how big the sport is in other places, and that maybe some of them are like big fish in a smaller pond here, and it's like quite motivating for a lot of people. But the ones who get to go and play like real field lacrosse games with umpires and everything like that, that is how we're really retaining our numbers right now. And we talked a little bit on Friday about some ways where we can maybe make it a little easier and accessible for people to get some of those games in. Like something in the West, we run like a little mini regional tournament, or like clubs just start meeting each other, whatever that really looks like for people. But a big way that we are able to retain numbers is because people are leaving to play somewhere else and they're coming back and they're motivated. Ultimately, for female lacrosse players, right now, the opportunity is in field lacrosse. I think there's a lot going for box lacrosse, which is really, really exciting. But for most of these girls right now that are interested in any sort of opportunities, it is field. They have to get a field stick in their hand and they have to find ways to play. And so being creative with, even if you, again, go out to your box practice, but use your field stick, like that's how they're going to be able to reach those goals of like pursuing any opportunity if that's what they are interested in.
Yeah. And then anything for, if you want, like for us with lacrosse, it's been such a stepping stone in getting into university, getting an education, getting jobs, just one of those things that it helps with your path. And unfortunately for box lacrosse, although it's in the works, but there's nothing for girls post. I mean, you can still play box lacrosse like recreationally, but there's no NLL, unfortunately. So if you want to go further with playing lacrosse, it is going to be in the field game. So if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to get comfortable with the stick. And but in saying that, like kind of back to what we touched on before, all these box across concepts are coming into this field game. So it's not like you're changing the game too much. I mean, there's a bunch of rules, of course, they're going to have to learn, but having box across as your foundation of a skill set, it's incredible, because now you're learning how to catch a ball in tight space. You're learning all these creative movements that with a pocket you can do, and you can do without fear that you're gonna, lose a possession. And 30-second possession shot clocks, like those are so quick that you can try a backhand, you can try around the world, you can try a twizzle, you can try all these different things, because you're like, we're gonna get the ball back, it's okay. And once you get those movements down with your stick, now you added creativity into your arsenal of skill set. And now when you go to the field game, you're trying those things because it's muscle memory for your stick. And then once you're starting to do that, you have coaches looking at you going, oh, wow, look what this girl just did with the field stick. And then it gets super exciting. Like there was one girl I remember, I don't know if I can like name drop here at all. I don't know if that's one of those things, but there was a girl from the West Coast who she threw a wicked backhand from like one end of the field to the next. And that caught a coach's attention, and she grew up playing some box across. So it's just one of those things that if you get comfortable with the box stick, comfortable with the movements there, pick up a field stick, start practicing those. Next thing you know, it's going to be just muscle memory and movement. And now you're doing what you did in box, you're doing it on the field. So they're meshing so well together right now that I think the interest, although it is very difficult, I'm not going to say it's super easy by just doing one thing, but if that's a mindset and you can get that shift into field lacrosse and understand that there's still box across concepts, it's going to make it that much easier of a transition to keep girls involved. And then knowing that you can go and get your education paid for, whether that be Division 1, whether that be Division 2, or even Division 3. Like there's opportunities, but you just have to kind of work for them. You have to make sure that you're doing the right things. And like you said, with numbers, you have to travel to play, unfortunately, especially with the West Coast. You really have to travel to play. I see Russ popping on.
Yeah, I had a good question here from a participant. His daughter is starting soft lacrosse at U5 this season. Love that, 4-year-olds. Do you recommend her starting with a box or a field stick? Great development question. How do you, of course, she's probably playing in a box lacrosse program. How do you go to your coach, and what are some things you can do as a parent, maybe, to go to the coach and assist with some of what you're talking about?
If it's a go ahead, Ash.
You can start. Okay, no, I was gonna say I actually had an experience with this week at a camp I was helping out with. There was a young girl. It was a hybrid camp, so we did field and box, and she had both sticks, and she came to all 4 days, and it was 2 days field, 2 days box. The difference between her using her box stick and her using her field stick was like night and day. Box stick has a pocket. The field stick she has was one of the ones that you would probably get at a Canadian Tire. So confidence with the field stick, very low. Confidence with the box stick, it grew. So I would recommend using the box stick just to get those fundamentals down and understanding what's required to catch a ball, what's required to throw a ball. And it's a lot more exciting when you can basically throw it to their stick. And if you got good accuracy and it hits their stick and it's in the stick, you're building confidence that they can catch that. And then maybe transition to a women's field stick, but always keeping in mind that let's get her excited about the field game while we're also getting excited about box. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was going to say the same thing, especially if everyone else is using a box stick. We want to build that confidence, and she wants to be successful out there. That's how she's going to want to come back and play. I don't think it would hurt to put a field stick in her hand, like at home or whatever when you're practicing. Mm-hmm. But if it's a box league, absolutely use the box stick. Again, a lot of the fundamental skills are transferable. So if we see success with a box stick, then we can start to see some success with the field stick as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I just had another one here too. How do you bridge the gap on the rules? Oh yeah, so this is a great question. I remember going to my first tournament probably 20 years ago and 25 years ago, watching a women's field game. And I was like, what's happening on the field right now? So for a coach, let's say in Lethbridge, Alberta, Regina, that maybe hasn't been exposed to wherever, and much women's field, what would you say as far as, resources, or how do you bridge the gap so that coach might want to start some women's field, but would find it very overwhelming to learn an entirely different kind of set of rules? What are some intermediary maybe there?
Yeah, there's lots of rules. Women's field lacrosse has a lot of rules, and they're changing it now so that it's more spectator friendly already without the stopping and starting and all of that. But there are a lot of rules. I think the biggest things that we need to be aware of are those rules that are implemented for safety, right? Like the big ones are not checking towards the head, all of that, shooting space, like not getting into that area and people trying to shoot through all of the girls in the middle with no helmets. There's some really good resources on YouTube and all of that, like people just breaking down some of those major rules, such as shooting space. A couple years ago in Alberta, we actually had some of the umpires that came to ref nationals for us. They ran a really great clinic. Lyndsay, I think you're on here. It was fantastic. It was really helpful. We had her talk to our team as well, but those big safety rules are really important. At school, we have our boys play field lacrosse against our girls. So they have to learn some of those rules. And the big ones that we always talk about are checking safely, not towards the head or towards the body, coming across the body, and then shooting space in 3 seconds are kind of big ones that we go over with them. And they're able to play pretty well with those ones.
And on that note, it is very overwhelming, especially if you're a new coach coming and you want to start the sport or you want to just learn more about it. Highly recommend taking it one practice at a time, maybe tackle 1 or 2 rules at a time. Don't throw everything up at the one practice. It's a lot to retain. And in saying that, if you have access to former players or anyone who can also come out and maybe help out for a couple practices, those are always a great resource. It's really nice to have former players come back and help out at a practice. And just in saying that too, once you do that, now you're having these girls see people who have gone through and played the game, who are now coming back and giving back and promoting the game and are excited about it. So I would definitely recommend, if that's an option, then it's a great option. It is a luxury to have that, but if that's something you can do, highly recommend it. But yeah, what Sarah said, the safety rules are ones that you should definitely tackle first, because nothing's worse when you're watching a game and all of a sudden it's whistle, 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 and you see the players getting so frustrated because they don't know what's going on and why they're getting the call. So you tackle the big safety ones first, then the little ones kind of come and follow.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the safety rules make so much sense that they're very intuitive, right? Once you start to understand them. I had a question here. Given the new technology in women's field stick specifically, do you think it's possible to string a box stick and a field stick to throw the same way? And if so, do you have specifics on how this could work?
Are you meaning to use one of your old box sticks to?
Yeah, I think that he's meaning with some of the ability for women's sticks to have more of a pocket than they, I guess the design of them has more of a pocket in them. Is there a way to string a men's stick and a women's stick to be similar?
Well, so with the women's sticks now, well, first of all, we'll just start about the heads in general. So with a box stick, there's much more of a plastic sidewall for the actual head. And the rule for the pocket in women's field is that you have to be able to see the tip of the ball above the sidewall of the stick. So the thinner the sidewall of the plastic of the head, the bigger pocket you can have. So just so we start there, so you can't really take your box head and say, let's string it for a field, just because the head is so thick that it takes away from the pocket, because you won't be able to have any to see the ball up top, if that makes sense, I hope. And then transitioning from that, you can now use mesh in the field game. And that allows for quite a nice pocket and a consistent pocket. Normally it would be used with traditional leathers, and once you kind of get the rein, pocket can adjust, and then you kind of have to get used to that every single time. But in saying that too, there is a guy down here in the Lower Mainland. He's actually someone I've coached with for years, but he strings sticks, both men's and women's, but he strings all the women's sticks now, and he's a great stick stringer, and he strings them quite similarly to men's sticks. But if you actually look at them, the heads, there's so many more sidewall holes that the way you string them, you can string them. So I don't know if I'm making any sense. In my head, it makes a lot of sense, but you can string them on the side for hold of the pocket.
The actual pocket itself in your field stick, the ball sits higher. So for it to throw similar to your box stick, it travels a lot less than it would out of the pocket of your box stick.
Yes.
Ideally, your pocket wants to be up high. The mesh is fantastic. There's a lot of ways you can string these sticks to feel and hold like a box stick, absolutely. But for the most part, most of I don't know if this makes sense in my hand, but like the ball should sit a lot higher than it would in the pocket is more mid in a box stick, if that makes sense. It just travels less.
And I think that would also come to the difference in the actual cradling techniques, where in box lacrosse, you can go one-handed, you can be tight to your body, you can hold it out. The ball can sit, it's got a nice pocket that it can actually travel in, I guess, if you want to say it that way. And then when you come to the field side, the second you're going to try to do that one-handed cradle, it's coming straight out. So that's why there's more of an exaggerated high cradle, because the ball sits in that top pocket. So with today's technology, yes, it is strung in the sense that it's mesh, that it's available. You can use mesh now. Where the pocket sits, I think it's still going to be quite different from the women's field game to the box game. If that answered your question, great. If not, we're so sorry.
You're going to end up getting put on the equipment review committee for Lacrosse Canada if you're not careful with this. I've got a couple more questions that have just come in. Of course, the U.S. lacrosse, because it's such a big organization, does a great job of resources. Do you guys have any off-the-cuff kind of resources for different age groups that you rely on online that are, in the U.S. mostly probably based, that you could send people to?
There's a website, it's called Women's Lax Drills, and you can get like a monthly membership or a yearly membership. And last year I used it for some PD, and it was honestly like fantastic. There's tons of resources on there. Like Boss Talks on there, Daily's been on there. Basically every month they have a new speaker, and it's usually like a college coach. I think Shake School was on there one time, and they go and they talk about what one is like a zone ride, and then Boss did a thing on defense and sliding. There's goalie drills on there, and you can kind of search from any kind of skill work that you want to do to more like concept stuff. And you have to pay for it, but you can go and watch the sessions live, or with your membership you can like go back and rewatch all of them too. And I thought it was like, it's very well done for a lot of drills. I used lots from it.
What was that one called?
It's called Women's Lax Drills. Yeah,
I haven't heard of it before. I'm gonna write it down.
The IWLCA also does, I think it's every couple years, but they'll put out like a drill book essentially, and you pay for that as well, but it's donated to IWLCA for whatever. But a lot of coaches will put in drills. So like just our like past Team Canada staff, like Scott Teeter's been in it, Scott Tucker's been in it. So there's lots of good drills that way too.
Nice.
Okay, I think we have I'm hoping Brodie, we have one of our next speakers that has a question for you. Brodie Merrill, I think he's can be unmuted. I'll let him jump in here. He's a good question for you. Oh, there he is. Hey, Brodie.
Hey guys, this is great.
Hi.
I'm learning a lot listening, so this is great. My daughter's 11 years old, so she's been playing for a few years, and so I'm kind of just really engaged in the women's game, and kind of want the best for her with that in mind. I was a little frustrated this past year seeing the 2-pass rule that's in Ontario right up until U15. And for me, just as a parent, it's a little concerning just knowing kind of what's going on in the US. I just want to know what if you guys know what the reasoning behind that is, or if there's any kind of suggestions at that kind of critical point where it's also a lot of girls are starting around this age too with the softball and the no pocket, which is a really tough
bad combo. That's hard.
Yeah, it's really tough to kind of build that confidence and get going. So I think those are just the 2 questions. If there's any like the rationale behind the 2-pass rule, because it does develop kind of a different version of the game where it's you transition and then you stop, right? And then it's face guarding that's going on, and it kind of creates the flow. It's a much different flow. And then what do you suggest that kind of that if you were to kind of redo lacrosse in Canada, like what changes would you make at that entry point where there's a lot of friction in that with that softball and no pocket combo? And sorry, not to be too long-winded, but just one thing that's super appealing and why I've actually talked to a kind of an objective business person about U.S. lacrosse, like where he would invest his money in sport, and it would be in women's lacrosse in the U.S., where it's just growing at like an exponential rate compared to other sports. And I wonder what they're doing there. That's why they're having so much success there, and maybe some things we can adopt up here. So I'm kind of all over the place, but I just want to get your overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, we don't play with that 2-pass rule in Alberta, Brodie. So I'm not exactly sure what the rule is. Do you mind?
I know that we've had that in U12 in BC. I have not coached U12. I don't really go much lower than U15, but I have done camps where I've seen U12s, and my just complete from not actually being involved with it, but my outside thoughts is I've watched a U12 where one girl, they took it out and she just went straight to the net every single time, and everyone just sat there and stood. So I understand that that's frustrating, because I know my thought was, why is there a 2-pass rule? And I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's to kind of get more people involved and not to have this standing around and to pass the ball. But I see where they want to get everyone to catch and pass the ball. Like, I understand that part. It's just, it is frustrating where it is frustrating once they go to U15 and that 2-pass rule isn't there, all of a sudden they're looking around like, I need to pass it again. It's like, no, you don't. Like, you can go to the net now at U15. So that's where that one transition kind of gets confusing. But
and I wonder why. I guess the big thing is the contact, because also I coached U7 boys. Like why is my 11-year-old, who's way more advanced than my than my 7-year-olds, have to have this rule, right? Where at that stage they don't, right? I mean, it's you kind of self-correct, I'd say, a little bit in the flow of a game. If somebody's going to the net every time, well, it shouldn't be on the team and the players to kind of correct that and and adapt, right?
Yeah, and is your 7-year-old, sorry, a son?
Yeah.
And then your daughter's 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I felt like the game was kind of dumbed down for my older sibling daughter,
yeah,
as opposed to my 7-year-old boys that are playing like, that's another soapbox I get on. There's no way there should be full contact in U9 and U7. It's crazy to me still. But it's where there's no 2-pass rule, right?
Yeah.
And it's a more free-flowing game. Why is somebody that's 3, 4, 5 years older having to play a dumbed down version of it?
I honestly think that's a great question. I just saw someone jump on though. I know, Lyndsay.
Oh yeah, I
can answer all of these questions.
I was like, we have Lyndsay, so this is the one who actually needs to talk about this, because she will clear it all up.
I have really great news for you, Brodie. You will enjoy the rule changes that are coming in for your daughter this year.
Oh,
so
nice.
The 2-pass rule is out of under 13.
Nice.
There are some, I can tell, it was initially put in because our first few years, the vast majority of rules that are in for those age groups are because coaches were exposing holes in the rules and not playing the game the way a game is sort of like meant to be played, if that makes sense. A good example of that is our goalies, because of the 2-pass rule, we had goalies coming out to double team a player because they obviously couldn't go to net, which isn't fair because they can't go to net because they don't have a second, their second pass in. So it was rules were being exposed, and the game wasn't sort of being played in the manner that a game would be played. So a whole lot of those rules have changed to make it a lot more realistic to the game and free flowing for them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I do think that flow, right? You just it was a lot of like get there and wait and wait for people to get open. But
absolutely, I officiated it once or twice.
Yeah. Okay, I'll jump here. I've got another question. Thanks everybody for that. It's good dialogue, because you want to preserve the integrity of the game, and I get the growth and development, right? Like I know in U7 here, I've modified our rules when we've grown Cranbrook into a substantially bigger area as far as players now. But a lot of the rule changes we made at, for instance, U7 were like, we don't need contact, right? We don't need these kids getting hit. And, the fall back rule. So you didn't have kids just pressuring kids learning to play with the ball. And then by 8 years old, they were totally integrated. 9 years old, they were totally integrated, and they had good stick skills. It just gives them a little bit of time. But then you have to learn the transition of the game, right? The game is a transition game. You have to learn that flow. I have one from Mark here. I'm learning the female game for my daughter. I'm unsure of what type of stick do I buy. I see mesh, leather, runners. I'm confused. I'm really confused. I think some of them look wicked cool. I don't know if I could even buy them and use them because I don't know if they're legal. And so, and then of course you get into US versus Canada rules on some of this stuff. But I mean, some of those cool looking gate heads, I just want to buy them because they look cool. We even put them on the wall or something.
Yeah, Lyndsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
FIL changed their rules recently, so most of the American sticks are legal.
Yes,
right?
There is no international approved stick list per se anymore. If it is legal in the NCAA, it is generally legal in Canada and for World Lacrosse.
Nice.
There's very few, like almost all of your high-end sticks are going to be good for your daughter. It just sort of depends on her preference and at the higher levels what position she plays.
Yeah.
And I can answer more about that if they want, but it's their clinic. They can answer more about that too.
Hey, all this rule stuff, I love that you're here. It makes me so happy. But
go ahead, Ash. Sorry.
I was just gonna say the thinner the lacrosse head, the better. So if you're starting out, you don't have to worry so much about getting her the high. Yeah. So right there with what Lyndsay has, is that a gate one?
Yeah, it's a gate whip.
See, that looks cool. Like, it just looks
Yeah,
cool.
they look so cool. Like the way that
And
the
legal.
gates have, yeah, the way that they've designed their stick. So this is perfect actually. So that dip in there, we call it the hook in the head. So the way that that's set up, it's a very thin white lacrosse head, and it allows that the mesh can be deeper of a pocket. So that one's strung with leathers, I believe.
It's got like
Or
it has
sidewall
runners,
string?
but they're not leather. It's like the
No?
mesh. It's all strung, but there's no
Okay,
mesh in it,
perfect. Okay. Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
has
Okay.
like
So that's like close to a traditional style way of stringing where it's like no mesh, just really cool hold. But you don't have to worry about like a stick. So depending on how old they are, the younger they are, just make sure that probably it's going to be a pink stick that they're going to be excited to get, or a nice blue stick or anything. But the thinner the wall of the head, the better, because it's going to allow them to have a deeper pocket, and then again, more control and more probably confidence catching the ball. You don't have to go to like the $200, $300 sticks, but as you get older, those ones are designed to help your gameplay and allow you to have way more hold in the ball, which means that you can actually like throw some really cool fakes and great dodges, stuff like that. Anything else you want to touch on, Sarah?
Yeah, depending on where you're from too, sometimes those sticks aren't accessible. The biggest thing is like getting a ball in whatever stick you have. Like Sport Check in Alberta carries some sticks, and they are some of those like, they're not as good. They don't have much of a pocket. They're very tight. They're pulled very tight. It's not your like String King or Gate or STX or anything like that. It's more of like the Nike Under Armour kind of things at Sport Check. Like for us in Alberta, we basically have to order everything from the States. You order it online, so it's a lot of money. If you're just learning, get comfortable with a ball and whatever stick you have access to, and pound the pocket in. Like you can keep that ball in and get a pocket established, but obviously like the String King, Gate, all of those, and like the more technology in the sticks does make it easier depending on where you're from and what's accessible. Though it does depend on that.
I would add one thing to that is that this piece right here, I just literally lost the ball stop on it. I think this is sort of standard. This mesh piece down here is a little more standard now if they want a little bit more hold as an attacker.
That's good, great stuff. I had another question here. What have any of you experienced working with women's hockey teams because of that growth and development for recruiting girls just in general into lacrosse? And if so, what has been your approach? I mean, it's a great question. Women's hockey has come leaps and bounds. I know in Cranbrook, that's going to be our next area of growth. We've gone from 80 players to 200 this year, and we have some female players, but our big area of growth for female players is going to be reaching out to minor hockey now and trying to integrate that and then taking them from box to field. Have you guys had any experience with this or know of people that have had that?
I have not actually, which that kind of surprised me. I just kind of forgot about like women's hockey with women's field. Like that was such a bridge I didn't even think to connect. So I don't know. I have not had any experience with that, but I'd love to get some of those girls involved and vice versa.
Yeah, in Alberta, there's some clubs that promote like trying to get ringette players and hockey players and everything like that to come play box lacrosse. Here, our problem is trying to recruit field lacrosse players. I go into the box clubs actually, and I coach box practices and everything like that. And I bring my field stick, and that's how we're trying to bring more female players to play the field game. But there are clubs that take that approach. I know for box lacrosse here in the Edmonton area that do try to get hockey and ringette players. Hockey is tough. They do the spring leagues and summer hockey and everything like that. So sometimes it can be tough depending on what level of hockey they actually play.
Okay, great. We're starting to wind down here a little bit. Another question that came in. What are some easy overlap skills between box and women's field? Maybe a couple on defense. I'm adding the defense and offense. Maybe a couple on defense, a couple on offense that, if taught well in box, will transfer easily. I mean, defense pretty obvious in just man to man, but I'll let you two kind of handle that.
You want to take offense? I'll take defense, seeing as that's what we played.
Perfect. You can start.
Okay. For defense, I think one of the biggest things would be probably switching, and like with pick and rolls. That's a big one with like a 2-person game, because that happens all over the field. And that's, yeah, I would say that like defensively, that's going to be huge, just knowing how to switch and switch effectively. And then I think for a lot of people too, it would be making contact. So establishing contact, which might seem weird as people are thinking that there's no contact in women's field, because I think I've gotten more bruises in women's field than I have in box lacrosse. All up and down the arm is where you want to establish that contact. And when you're bodying up on your attacker coming in, or even if like someone's cutting through and you're able to not actually take them off their lane, but if you're able to make contact with them, it's on their upper arm. And being able to do that, I think, is super effective. And that's something that you do in box cross too. Like as soon as they're cutting through the middle, like you're hitting them off their path, or you're just like making sure you're giving them some like glove taps, letting them know that you're there. And yeah, I would say knowing how to switch effectively and the body contact, that's going to be 2 huge ones. And that'll transition into like positioning and just team defense in general. So I would say those 2 for sure.
Yeah, offensively, like a lot of those, like the 2-man game right now, if you watch NCAA games, like teams are clearing sides for 2 girls to just work together, set those picks, roll off, slip underneath, whatever that looks like for them. The 2-man game is like really making its way into the female game. How you set the pick is a little different. But I love the 2-man game. And like I said earlier, we do a lot of 2-man stuff. We run all of the box drills with our guys in high school, and we just play to the field rules there. Same thing, like if we're trying to like teach moving the ball quickly, we'll run like 3-on-2s, but we'll run that box style where we start low and we come up high and we attack from up high that way. So we can run some of the box drills in field, which our girls really like as well. But backdoor cuts, 2-man game, all of that like really transfers. As far as like the fundamental skills, all of that transfers. Shooting, you have the same push pull. Protecting your stick is, I can't hang my stick out here as much in field lacrosse because they're looking for that check. Like it's really protected in here. So shooting with my wrist sometimes is a little different, but I still want that push pull with my top hand and my bottom hand. Power shooting, everything like that, like transfers so nicely into the field game from box and vice versa. So.
Okay, perfect. Last question. Sixes. How do you see sixes bridging the gap here a little bit? Brodie had just noted to me that he thinks it's a great option for us to integrate that. Because men's box to men's field there's not as much of a change, right? In how you approach those. A lot of our Canadians for years and years just got picked up by NCAA to do what they do best, which is finish. How do you think sixes is going to help change the landscape for Canadian players?
I think it's great. I mean, I think it's basically box across on a field, even faster. It's like you're just consistently transitioning, which is great. I just think that it's a good use of space. And then especially with the women's side, I've always kind of thought to myself, I think a lot of people have thought this too, or think this, is that when you play the women's game, because of the stick, like you have to have such finesse and such poise when you play that it's all about stick skills, quite frankly. Like, you don't have that pocket, so everything is that much more delicate when you're cutting, when you're dodging, anything like that. So to be able to do that with that stick at that fast of a pace, I think it's huge. It's like a different skill set. And it's super fun to watch. I got to watch that this summer, and it was just, I don't know, I think it looks so cool. And I think that the gap for that is it's just helping it even more. It's just making it that much more intriguing, and it's really fun to watch. And it's, like I said, I think it's basically box lacrosse playing the sixes game is like box lacrosse on a transition game 9 times out of 10, where you're like just going for the fast break, getting maybe a 10-15 second settled offense, and then you're going the other way. Like, it is nonstop. It's entertainment from the defense to the transition to the offense. So I think it's a very good thing. I could never run it. That makes me gasp, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I like it too. I love that as lacrosse players, both male and female now, there's an opportunity to represent your country in the Olympics. I think that is fantastic. I think that it might actually bring more box players into more of a field style kind of game as well. The only hesitation is that we are fighting for numbers for field lacrosse alone here. So for sixes to really take off, specifically in Alberta, we would need to find a way to run it as a completely separate season, and try to work with the rest of the provinces that way to work towards some sort of like national sixes or whatever that looks like. But there's so much conflict between box and field already. So for growth of the sport here, it might be a little difficult, but I think that it might actually bring a lot of box players into field eventually. And I loved watching it too. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think it could be a great entry level game, right? A really great entry level game for anybody. This was awesome. Why don't you give us a little update of what you two are up to? Sarah, we can start with you, a little bit of where you're at now and where you're working, what you're doing. I know you touched on it at the beginning, but go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I am an instructor at Vimy Ridge Academy. So I work under Jimmy Quinlan there. We're a public school, and we just run like a sport alternative lacrosse academy there. We teach both box and field. So I'm very lucky that I get to do lacrosse for a living. I'm the women's director for the Edmonton Razorbacks, which is our grassroots sanctioned program here. And I also coach for North Strong, and we try to travel with some girls and take them down to the States.
That's great. Ashley?
Yeah, I am the current program head coach for Team BC, the field lacrosse side of things. So we take a travel team. There's 5 different age groups now, and we take a travel team to recruiting tournaments, IWLCA ones in the summer throughout the year. So yeah, I help oversee the 5 teams. I was an assistant manager at a brewery, which was amazing, but I did recently just quit my job. So unemployed right now, but it's fine. I'm actually like doing a lot more with the lacrosse right now, which is great, helping out with camps. But yeah, other than that, I am the U19 head coach for BC for the Nationals. That's going to Quebec this year, Montreal. And then I'm also the head coach for the Team BC Box Lacrosse Junior female team that is going to Saskatchewan this year. So lots of lacrosse this year.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. It's good to hear those old names, Vimy Ridge and the Edmonton Razorbacks, both programs I'm very, very integrated with. Starting the Razorbacks, in 2005, I think is when we started that program. So it's got some history behind it now. A lot of kids that have gone on to Brodie school that I've sent out came through those programs too. And I think this session, I'm getting direct messages from people that was awesome. That was amazing. What a great organic session to just have your two brains and giving people some understanding of how to integrate these two great sectors, because you had said it earlier in the week when we met. I think if people want to go play in the NCAA and you're a woman lacrosse player, a female lacrosse player, you got great opportunity right now. It's growing at a crazy rate. This is what Title IX was supposed to do. It was supposed to even the playing field a little bit, and I think it's a great opportunity. So I really appreciate both of you jumping on. I wish you both the best going into your season, and keep coaching. We need both of you in the game for a long time.
Well, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Okay, perfect. So for everybody else, I know there's a lot of you are going to be staying on for the next session, which is regarding recruiting. We're going to be talking about all the different levels of recruiting with Lyndsay and Brodie. Will be on. We'll maybe start that in about 4 minutes. We'll give people an opportunity to use the washroom or grab a water quickly. Thanks, ladies. All right, we might as well get going here. Thanks to everybody for jumping on this session or staying on. I'm sure we're gonna have some people jumping in here too a little bit later that maybe weren't on the first session. We are excited to have Lyndsay and Brodie here to talk us through some information about recruiting. Again, tonight's sessions are both very, very live sessions. They're driving a lot of people. They're a big deal for many people because it's the end game, right? And I think without, for instance, women's field lacrosse being scholarship bound for a lot of women, you don't have to get the top of the pyramid, and so you won't have the bottom of the pyramid if you don't have the top. And I think the guys recruiting into the NCAA and CIS and OUA and different groups has gone up quite a bit as far as numbers and focus points. So I will, I'm going to moderate with some questions, but I think some of the, probably some of the beginning stuff is just some information on what the different levels are. I think a lot of people get confused, like OUA and CIS and CUFLA and NCAA Division 1, 2, 3. What does it all mean? So maybe we'll start there. I'll let you guys maybe at the end, we'll go through a little bit of where you're at and what you're doing right now, if that works, and jump right into it. Thank you both for jumping on, and I'll let you start off with some of the definitions here.
You could go ahead and start, Brodie, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Recently, like I'm just kind of tracking it. There's, if you want to go on to play lacrosse, collegially, there's about over 400 options to do so, right? And so that's pretty cool to kind of extend your playing career, and then also have some educational opportunities. And so, yeah, how do you sort through all those options? I think it's it requires a lot of due diligence, and I'd say that you can't really take a passive approach to it. I think that it should be very much 95, 97% of it should be very process oriented in terms of, kind of the fundamentals of, prioritizing your academics and doing well in school and continuing to develop and work on your game and your craft and kind of get, continue to build yourself athletically, bigger, stronger, faster. But that last, that should, if you're focused on, the process of development, your growth as a person, as a player, you want to put yourself, set yourself up for success. And then it is, taking an active approach. I'd say in all my time coaching and kind of being in this world, there's very few that are just actively recruited, the Jeff Teets of the world, the Aurora Accordingleys of the world that where you kind of have a lot of coaches kind of being competitive to get these. For most, it is by reaching out or having a coach or mentor reach out on your behalf. It's putting together a highlight film, a clip, and writing the emails, making the phone calls, to try to make that connection. And so that, I think people are surprised by that, like because sometimes like the exposure piece gets a little bit could be a little bit right time, right place, where I think doing your own due diligence to find that right fit and going through all the so like narrowing all those 400 options based on the location of the school, the academic programs offered, your financial situation, and financial opportunities, obviously like the history of the lacrosse program, kind of competitively where you may fit. And so, I think it's probably a lot less random than when I was going through it years and years ago. I think there's still some similarities, and it's kind of like, sorry, I won't ramble too much here, but an old hockey coach would say, like, just do really well where you are now. And then you reference a player that went on to the NHL that no one would have guessed, is because he just kept impressing the coach where he was, right? And that coach would just advocate for the next level, and that coach would advocate for the next level, and so on. And eventually had a long career in the NHL. And I think that's good advice. Kind of be where your feet are, and do as best you can in school, do the best you can, developing as a player, and then take the time to do your due diligence to help kind of narrow down all those options that are out there.
Yeah, the one thing I would agree with the most on that is it is a process, and it's a little bit more structured than most people think. Some important things that people don't realize early on is in the NCAA specifically, your grades matter from grade 9 onward. It's not like a Canadian university where it's usually your top 6 or however many grades or however many marks at grade 12. Your grades can matter from grade 9 onward. So that's super important. There's also everyone has a different path. There are lots of paths to get there. But it does take work no matter what you do. And for the women, at least, or the girls, it's probably your spring, summer of your grade 10 going into grade 11 year is the most important for exposure and making sure that you're making video and have good video of yourself, as well as sending emails to coaches. The one thing I think we tell girls all the time is, like, you can pick a top 10 list of any schools you want, but then you need, the next 50 to be realistic. So you need to look at where you are academically, where you are athletically, and start working with those.
I'd say that's pretty common, is that you get, like, if you're going to pull high school players that are playing right now, a lot of them will say, will reference Syracuse, Virginia, Maryland, and I was doing the same at that age, but then just kind of broadening your horizons a little bit and looking to find the right fit, and understanding, and maybe get a little bit of objective feedback, right, from different coaches, people around you, that, hey, where do you think I fit? What's my potential? There's so many hidden gems out there as well. I'd say there's a little bit more variance in and disparity in the US compared to Canada, where it's all pretty, the quality of education, we get really good value with our universities up here. In the States, sometimes it's a little bit all over the map, right? And so, for me, I remember being so green with it, not really knowing schools like Bucknell or a Lehigh or a school that I looked at, Middlebury, which, you know, got to know really well and was, you know, kind of blown away. And so, I think the Division 1, 2, and 3 kind of gets a little bit overrated. It is more just finding, hey, what's a fit for me, my personality, where I'm at, both academically and athletically.
And what are some things you guys would use as far as the profile of the player, if you were coaching them or working with them, to help them figure out what they are looking for? Like, there's the obvious, you know, if they're into liberal arts, then you're going to look at schools that maybe have good liberal arts programs. What are some other indicia or characteristics that you would throw at players that will help them kind of narrow in into like 8 or 10 schools that they really want to look at?
With the girls, we actually don't start with where they are, like play-wise. We usually start with questions about what they want from a university, being, do you want it close? Do you want it far? You know, what size of a school do you want? And then we start to talk about how important is it that you play midfield versus defense, or attack versus midfield? How important is it that you play as a freshman or a sophomore? Because those things all have to integrate into their decision. Because if you want to play as a freshman, you're probably not going to UNC or Northwestern as a female athlete, with a few exceptions, obviously.
Yeah, I think, well said. I think it's just kind of, what do you prioritize out of your experience, right? And I think that's you know, and a lot of times they don't, you know, I'd say that most don't really know, right? They're trying to find themselves and figure out kind of who they are and what they want, and usually pretty broad and open. But it's just kind of asking some of those questions, like, you know, especially in the US, like, you know, every state is very different. You know, the feel in Vermont compared to the feel in Georgia, right? They're going to be like kind of two different worlds. And so again, what more resonates with you, and you know, but I'd say most don't really know and are pretty open, but start to kind of ask those kind of harder questions where again, that could help kind of narrow things down, and sometimes it takes two to tango as well, right? It's trying to put yourself out there and see what some needs are out there too, and across the landscape. But yeah, and I do think too, it's a moment in time that could be busy. It's a little bit, I'd say there's a lot of stress in it. I think exercising a lot of patience, but if you can go on some visits, which can be, you know, can be costly. But I think it's a good investment to take, even if you're not actively being recruited, like, you know, getting a sense, you know, attending maybe a few prospect days at different levels, and kind of seeing what's out there, I think gives you better context to make this big decision. Yeah, it's a little bit like buying a house. One of those big decisions that you can kind of count on one hand, right? You kind of, you know, you don't want to jump into it. I think in a lot of cases, though, like getting there, seeing it, feeling it, meeting the people, kind of some of those intangibles, just like, yeah, I can picture myself here. I kind of feel at home here. And then wherever you go, there you are, right? Like, no one choice is going to be perfect. It's going to be definitely what you make of it. And so don't try to go out and find that perfect option. Just try to find the right fit for you, and what aligns with what your goals are.
We talk a lot for our Ontario kids that if they go to a campus tour, there's usually a campus that feels like home in Ontario. And because you know that you're going to get a good education no matter where you go in Ontario, to pick the place that feels like home, that's going to be your best choice. We encourage our girls, I coach under 17 Team Ontario, when we travel, if it is not a team travel trip, we encourage them to stop at campuses en route with their parents, even if they're not doing a camp, and find like the feel of campus to see what works for them. If we are with them, we try our best to get them on campuses to get tours and see what they like, because there's a difference between a city campus or, you know, a fully out in the country, self-enclosed space. So I think that's the other thing that you have to remember is if lacrosse isn't working for you, you're still at that school and you have to be happy with that school and its academics. Even if lacrosse, if you have an injury, unfortunately, or whatever, you are at that school, you need to be happy with your choice.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I really like the idea of getting that feel, right? That feel of where's home. Like I remember going to, you know, the University of Saskatchewan for my education degree, and as soon as I got there, it just totally felt like a nice, relaxed place that I wanted to be. It was definitely a good fit. And you bring up some really good points on you know, what do you want in a university, but like playing D or O. That's something that comes up a lot with kids that I've worked with that have been recruited. Is a lot of kids get brought up because of the way the system is to think, well, I got to score goals, right? Let's have a call coming through here. They'll get caught up in I've got to score goals, and they'll be a good goal scorer in a box lacrosse program in Western Canada. But if they want to get recruited, the coaches might think, hey, this could be a great D midi, or this kid could be a great LSM, or, you know, and being able to adapt on the fly it's a great point. I had a question here. I think they're meaning KUFLA and OUA, NCAA. Tell more information about that and why you would pick one over the other. I think probably some of the personal fit you just talked about will be part of that, but I think maybe people just don't know the difference. Is, for instance, if they're way in the West, they might not know that.
Yeah, I'm just writing down. I was actually thinking about that. You know, kind of the differences amongst those you know, designations. I would say, like, so I went to Georgetown down in Washington D.C. and it was I would say the lacrosse experience took up a big portion of my day, right? So it was probably devoting 3.5, 4 hours to lacrosse daily. I loved it. You know, there's some that would say, oh, it feels like a job. And so you're kind of signing up for that. I'd say for a lot of the more competitive schools at the D1, D2, D3 level, right? Where it's a big commitment. And I'd say sometimes people chase that D1 a lot, but I always say, like, I look at a program like RIT, who's got a lot of Canadian, really successful Division III program, happen to have a lot of Canadian players. I don't think that's a coincidence, but they, it's, you know, when you're winning and in a successful program, the grass is a little bit green, the sky's a little bit bluer, right? We know that, like, and just being in that winning culture compared to maybe a lower level D1 school where you're not experiencing that same success, right? I've just seen that with some that I actually was talking to one that transferred from a D1 to D3, and that was one of the things that they had pointed out. And some, I would say that some schools might afford you a little bit more balance. Like I'd say that for a lot of you know, KUFLA athletes, that you still get a really competitive lacrosse experience. And I would compare it to a lot of D1 programs in terms of the level. But there might be just a little bit more time and balance to have more of a well-rounded university experience. You know, that I knew kind of what I signed up for, and that's what I wanted. But it was a grind, right? And there wasn't a lot of time outside of lacrosse and school to do other things socially, or even, you know, be a member of a school club and things of that nature, where I do think playing KUFLA and even some of those D2, D3 schools might give you a little bit more time and balance to have, like, kind of a normal university experience, maybe travel abroad in the fall or whatever.
And just for those that don't know, KUFLA is basically the OUA for men's lacrosse, and OUA is women's lacrosse in Ontario, which I guess some people don't, they're not sanctioned sort of exactly the same. And they are both fairly competitive. CUFLA is very competitive, and they have some great programs. And women's OUA, as women's lacrosse becomes bigger and bigger in Ontario, the OUA just gets better and better. The one thing I would add to what Brodie said is D3 has a few different rules about where and how long you can practice at certain times. So there is a little bit more academic balance with your academic and life balance with those athletics. The other thing a lot of our athletes ask is like, what do I want to do when I'm done school? Because does it hurt me to go to the US and get this 4-year degree and then have to come back and do more education if I want to stay in Canada? Sometimes that path is better served to stay in Canada and play in the OUA than it is to go to the NCAA at certain schools, right? To just take a scholarship at any school and be like, well, my path will be the same is not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main concerns I've had over the last 15 years is you know the recruiting propaganda from some, you know, from programs sometimes, right? Of, you know, I've got $6 million in scholarships to kids. That doesn't, those stats don't tell me anything. How many of those kids have gone to good schools that they really like? They've come back, they've had great experiences. You know, some of the best kids I've coached out of this place, I'm in Cranbrook right now, are in CUFLA schools. You know, one of our kids is at McGill right now. He's having an unbelievable experience, right? And he's, you know, he's playing on a team with 20 other people. He's having all that great sports experience, but he's at a top school in the world, taking a, you know, probably taking a medicine degree. So I think it's a really good point. Fear of missing out. So I read this article too. Somebody had read an article on Changing the Game project on FOMO parents. This is becoming a massive concern around all sports. You know, football in Texas, hockey in Canada is FOMO. So parents, you know, trying to get their kids recruited, jumping on every recruiting team that they can see in the US, you know, trying to basically do anything they can. I know I spent quite a bit of time in Albany this fall and early and winter, and just seeing the intensity level of parents that want to make sure their kids don't miss out is a big deal. What are some of your comments on parents that maybe are worried, like, I've left it too long, my kid's 14 and he's not on the A team right now, what am I going to do? You know, you guys both have a lot of experience on getting kids and helping them get recruited. What are some of the comments you might have on that?
Can I just make one quick comment, is that the coaches don't want to see your parents. They don't want to talk to your parents. And unless your athlete or your child, son, daughter is incredible, parents can actually ruin a recruiting experience and have their kids not recruited by certain things. Every kid has a different path. There are multiple ways for an athlete to get to the NCAA if that's where they want to go. There is a fit for almost everyone. So having them panic at that point in time, you know, I actually love what Brodie said earlier, is do really well where you are right now. And that's going to be the best path. But I would say that we have a lot of NCAA coaches. One of their first questions are, what are her parents like? And, you know, if the parents are a little too intense, a lot of coaches will be like, you know, that's okay then.
It's true. It's yeah. I find it's with having 3 kids of my own, it's a real thing, right? You're trying to do what's best for your kids. You want to put them in the best situation possible. I'll be the first to say that I'm not objective when it comes to my own kids. There's, you know, when they're playing, I'm, you know, we're, as parents, we're only watching our kids, and so, yeah, that's a tough thing. I heard a good quote though. It's like, you want to prepare, not protect. And so, you know, letting son or daughter take ownership of it, provide some guidance. A friend of ours, Russ, Dan Noble, I would say, if you want to be kind of a crazy parent, be crazy with the things, again, that are process oriented, like getting to bed on time, like doing your homework every day. You're like, hey, get off your phone and go out and do some wall ball, kind of thing, process oriented things, rather than how many goals did you score today? You need to do that, and the other thing I would say is also, I'm kind of I have to remind myself of this. Like, more is not always better too, right? A lot of times we're seeing this a lot in sport, lacrosse, where playing on this team and that team, and where you're never really fully at your best, right? And so I would be really selective with how much you're playing, and especially in that recruiting window. And for most, I'd say, Lyndsay, I don't know if you would agree with me. The girls' window might be a little bit earlier, but I find with boys that the recruitable window tends to be a little bit later in that early, like kind of grade 12. Fall of grade 12 is like where you kind of narrow things down. We see a lot of people post grad too, which is an Americanized thing. Where just to provide yourself with more runway. It's very common for NCAA athletes to take either repeat earlier or take that extra year. And so, yeah, just be patient, play the long game. Don't feel like again, just fundamental things that are all pretty intuitive. But we need to kind of check ourselves sometimes with it. I know for me, I was very much a late bloomer as a player. I was always kind of middle of the pack on my Orangeville teams growing up. It wasn't until kind of 16, 17, 18 where I kind of started to hit my stride athletically, and everyone's a little bit different that way. So, I'd say don't feel like you're missing out. Like, it's always kind of funny because that September 1st is a big day, and there's not a lot that really get the calls. And now playing professionally, and talking about it a lot with some of my teammates over the years, a lot of the guys were were players that were overlooked, that weren't heavily recruited, that may have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, or like, and so it's very few. Like, it's not make or break. Going to this event or that event is not make or break. It's just focus that attention on just the good fundamentals of life, right? And good opportunities are going to find you.
Yeah, I would add to that. The girls' window is a little bit earlier. It's about fall of grade 10 to summer of grade 11 is your norm, unless you take a post-grad year. And actually, I'll use an example of one of our players that she came to the game really late. I think she probably started in grade 9, and we have her this year in grade 11, and she was really worried that she'd started too late. She didn't think that she would get that she'd get there in time, and she'd have to PG. She actually does also go to the Hill, where Brodie works, and she went with them to a few things and with us to a few things. And probably why the same players are with Brodie on Team Canada is she was determined to outwork everybody, and she just committed about 2 or 3 weeks ago to a great institution. And so everybody's path is different, and it doesn't matter if you're a little bit late.
Now, when you say the ages, Lyndsay, are you talking, is that OUA or are you talking NCAA? Because I know
NCAA.
NCAA. Now, what about OUA? Because I think, like, for me, the KUFLA and OUA options, and of course in the West we have Simon Fraser, which is MCLA down in the States, but some of these options are really appealing to me and to a lot of parents because of the funding model that we have in Canada. These schools are substantially less money to go to. The education is vetted at a higher level, so I don't have to go do as much. Like, if my kid's going to Queens or to McGill or Western, they're getting a great education. What are some age groups that you might alter, both Lyndsay and Brodie, for men and women that want to go to OUA or CIS?
OUA specifically doesn't usually start until you're in grade 12 and can apply, because they need to make sure that you can get into the university. almost every university program has an athlete profile online that you can click in and fill out. Usually, if you are at the end of grade 11 for girls, you would want to fill that out early on, so that, I would assume this is the same for boys, so that those coaches, if they want to come see you during the high school season, which is in the spring for girls lacrosse, or your summer season, and then once you get accepted, come the next sort of near the Christmas break, then they're going to have already seen you, and you know that they've looked at you and whether they would like you on your team. But there's no guarantee that you have to have done that prior. If you don't do that until you've already been accepted, there's still a lot of options with the OUA.
Yeah, it's almost like, yeah, if you have time, use it. I think that, yeah, like I just think of that window for on the boys' side is a good little window. Is that kind of that fall of your grade 12 years to start to kind of narrow things down. Do I want to take a PG year? Do I want to go NCAA? Do I want to stay here in Canada? And so, you know, and I think in the meantime, leading up to that, you want to be covering your basis and doing your due diligence. But I think that's a good window to kind of start to narrow things down and ask those kind of hard questions in terms of where you want to be, and act with a little bit more urgency.
Great. Question here. Any tips for being recruited when, I'm assuming, you know, maybe NCAA, but also others, when you can't get down to the States often? So, you know, you're in Alberta and maybe you get 2 trips a year because there's cost, et cetera, and you want to really maximize that opportunity. What are some things they can do?
I have, I think, 3 pieces. I mean, number one is film. We utilize IWLCA Recruits, which is a really good recruiting, I guess, program or online website that almost every NCAA coach uses. Having good film and well cut film, which I think is its own separate conversation, is really, really important. And then the second part would be pick and choose. Make sure that you're going to, if you get 2 or 3 goes, make sure you're going to camps that don't just have one program there. You're not just going to UNC's camp. You're going to a camp that has, you know, 10 different coaches where you're interested in at least 7 of those programs. And make sure you're going to the big events, but not ones that are so big that you're going to get lost in the mix. Ones where a lot of coaches are at, but not ones with 400 fields, ones with 8 fields, if you can possibly help it in those times.
Those are great. I would agree. Great points. Yeah, I do think it's worth it to try to find those tournaments that could be the right fit for you. And again, it's doing how much does it mean to you, right? Doing your own due diligence with that and finding those appropriate opportunities. I do think too, like if there's a local coach that maybe has gone through it before, that's again that objective mentor that can be that mentor for you. You know, along with some film, is to ask them to reach out to a coach that you might be interested in, that you feel like might be a realistic fit too, right? Like I think that I had that for me growing up, and just somebody local here in Orangeville that really helped me through that. And you know, I think that's really important, and to find that person in your local community, on the box team or field team that you play for, that you have a connection with, that somebody's outside your parents, and you know, most cases you'll be surprised, college coaches will respond to that, right? A coach will reach out with hey, I've got a potential recruit that would be a great fit for your school. He's a great kid. He's got this, you know, this great point average. He's this type of player. So that, especially if you're limited in terms of what kind of opportunities you can go down to, you gotta again not be passive with that.
There are also other opportunities. Lacrosse Canada this summer has 3 camps, I believe, or 3 or 4 camps for our national team. Keep in mind that 3 of the coaches on our national team are NCAA coaches. So that's an opportunity that's sort of close to home for a lot of those athletes that they can make it to, where they're going to get better, get exposure, get to try out for our national program, and get seen in a different capacity.
Yeah, I know one thing that's happened, because I'm in the West here, West Coast now, or not on the coast, but the interior of BC, is with the opening of some of the NCAA female opportunities out in the West, which aren't available in men's. We have a lot of female programs down here that have actually told me at tournaments I've been at, we can't even fulfill our scholarships right now. Like, if you have some girls that are, good players that want to come play, I can get them some scholarships. So there's some really interesting opportunities too, that I think we don't realize are there sometimes, because maybe we don't have our pulse in the US on exactly what's happening and where the flow is happening. I know schools are always changing divisions. We had a comment here from Jason Rudge too. He's a coach at a university. He said, in the KUFLA, I like to hear from students in their grade 11 year. It gives me a chance to see them play, as well as get them up to the school during our fall season. Their grade 12 year, but most athletes do start to contact us in their grade 12 year. Yeah, I think that's great. Another question came in. Can we, or would you recommend using box film to get recruited if we don't have lots of good field video? How have coaches in the US or even in Canada approached these?
I think good lacrosse is good lacrosse, and actually it'll make you even stand out more, right? I think that's one of the things that makes us really unique and special up here, and why Canada's a lacrosse hotbed. The NCAA programs are looking up here now, right? Which has been a big shift. And so, yeah, if you have some, I think it's just quality, right? Having good quality film, and seen many players get recruited off of box and box alone. Yeah, I think it's something that's it actually kind of makes you stand out, I think, a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't feel any hesitation towards that.
Yeah, in the women's game, I don't think you're very rarely going to get recruited on box alone, but having box film is awesome for the girls. They know that you have, this, like, these two sides of it. You can generally play with the IQ in those tight spaces, and that 2-man game that they were talking about earlier, which is so big in the US. It also shows that, like, the NCAA, the women's game has it's a lot more physical than, what you're seeing regularly at even at world lacrosse levels. And so they know that if you're playing box, you can often take that physicality. I would say if you are, a 7 field player, having the ability to play box makes you an 8 or a 9, and just that much more recruitable. And I would definitely add your box film. We have lots of our girls that have mixed their film together, or have a completely separate set of box film to their field film. And coaches consistently look at that as well as their field film.
Another cool little tip, I think, that is good, not to rule out any, like, it's not a make or break thing, but it's also like scanning rosters of certain programs, right, that tend to recruit a lot of Canadians, or it's kind of like that informal term, Canadian friendly schools. On the men's side, you think of Canisius, you think of Denver, you think of Delaware has done it really well recently. So, like, and there's others that aren't so much, right? Like, and you hear those stories where it's just like, yeah, I could never really get on the field because I didn't really fit or mesh well there. And so, I did go to a school where I was actually the first Canadian there, and I didn't play with any other Canadians during my time there, and it wasn't really a factor that I thought about too much, but but it also, like it might, if you're looking at a roster that has 10 to 12 Canadians on it, that's something that they're seeking out, or they appreciate kind of our skill set up here.
Yeah, that's great information. Great information. All right, we're getting kind of close here. I will, any other kind of points on recruiting that you two may want to go through, and then we'll kind of finish up with where you're at now and what are you doing. Any other kind of recruiting points? I do have some overview points that I will post in the chat for everybody, just trying to keep some notes here as I go through. But for Brodie and Lyndsay, anything that we've kind of missed through questions and answers that you maybe had on your list?
I'm just looking at my whole list. I think the one thing that I have that we have kids that'll come and they'll be like, okay, I want to go to the NCAA, and they're talking to me in grade 10 or 11, and they have really, really poor grades in grade 9 and grade 10. Like, your GPA matters from the get-go, and so academics matter more than I think people realize, and I think they have to be like cognizant that is important. I talked to the Brown coach the one day, and she just had a random question for me, and I made the comment that almost every girl on our roster had a 4.0, and it made a huge difference. She was at every one of our games. So I think that that academics matter from the get-go is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I was talking to Eddie Como about this recently. He kind of a mentor of mine, and got to work with him with the Canadian Sixes. It's just a good time to be a Canadian lacrosse player. There's, compared to kind of when we were growing up through the sport, there's so many options, educational options. Obviously I'm biased towards the Hill here locally, but there's also, I went to a US prep school for 2 years, and it was like a life-changing experience. I had the majority of it paid for through financial aid. And there's a lot more of them now out there than there was when I was growing up. But and then there's also a lot of great club programs too here, across Canada. And so you're really, Canadian lacrosse players are really well positioned. There's lots of great opportunity. The game's trending the right way, and so really, really just kind of go for it, right, and try to seek out those opportunities. And again, I wouldn't recommend taking a passive, I'll wait for them to come find me. Is go for it, do your due diligence, take ownership of it, have fun with it too, right? Like, it's a fun moment in time, and there's lots of great options. You'll end up where you should end up.
How do you think Sixes is going to change the landscape? Do you think Sixes will change the landscape at all? I mean, the NCAA game is constantly trying to evolve, I would say, to be more fan friendly when, as you start looking at more of the ESPN dollars and stuff that are required to pay those types of things. Do you think Sixes is going to, I guess, traditional field lacrosse, women's or men's, is going to start to morph to become more Sixes? Or do you think it's just going to be kind of this ad hoc sector that's needed to try to get into the Olympics?
I love Sixes. So I officiate a ton of it, but a ton of it being what I can, what's available right now. I don't think that the NCAA will give up their roster sizes. I think that sounds odd, but I think that they won't give up their roster sizes. They are route to go to 9, like 9v9 in women's. They're still at 11 plus a goalie. So I don't see them adapting it, but they may start to pick and choose rules that they like from it to move towards.
Yeah, I haven't experienced it. It was like initially the first weekend when the guys were doing it, and we're having kind of informal tryouts, and the novelty was there. It was felt kind of funny, and then but as it progressed, and as eventually when we got to competition, I think it's they're being strategic with it, right? They're taking a lot of things that work, right, and then maybe eliminating some things that maybe slow up the game, or they're kind of looking at it from a a longer view, and the fact that it could be played in the Olympics. That's another great selling point for anybody that's new to the game, right? It's going to be an Olympic sport. And so it was a lot of fun. I think, there's a lot to like in terms of, the amount of touches, the versatility it promotes. Just one other recruiting point I'd say that had me thinking of that experience, because, it was picking the 10, best players from across Canada, right? 12 with two goalies. But if you look at each one of those players, they all had a very different background. Some went to prep school, some didn't. Some went to big D1 programs, some didn't. Some went to, we haven't touched on junior college, which is actually a really good option. It's like a 2-year transition period to get to the NCAA. And that maybe if your grades are a little bit lower, if you want just a little bit more runway. Some of our top players in the world went to JUCO. Guys like John Grant Jr., Cody Jamieson, Josh Byrne, and so those are great options. So you just it's again, when you look at the top players in the world, I'm sure it would be the same on the women's side. Is that very, very unique? Everyone had a unique background and very different, and so that just tells me there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different routes to get there, but I'm really optimistic with sixes. I think there's a really good flow to it. I think I get really frustrated with face-offs, and I like, it was refreshing not having that, and the contact was a little bit different, the flow. So I think it'd be good to implement it a little bit more, and just in our programming, and maybe having a season there would. I think would be beneficial for sure.
Sixes made me feel like an old man for the first time, because when I first saw it, I was like, you can't change the game like this. Come on. And I was like, oh my God, I sound like my dad right now. But the more I've watched it, it has taken there'll be some morphing of the rules. I'm sure there's going to be some alterations, right? But it's really done a good job of highlighting what's skilled in the game and what's good, and trying to take out parts of the game that maybe, slow the game down or prohibit it from some of that growth. So I'm less of an old man than I thought when this started. So no more old man jokes, Brodie.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. And I was the same, right? The first time, like, I don't know, but again, you watch guys like Zach Currier and Josh Byrne and Jeff Pete kind of playing both ways and making the game their own, and seeing different strategy come in, and watching, Dana Dobie playing it, and I think it was Boaz, Emily, kind of they did the OD thing, but I thought both championships were really exciting to watch, and it was a good kind of basketball-ish, like that pace and that rhythm and the runs that teams go on, right? And so, yeah, I think it's...
And the goalies are spectacular.
Yeah, the goalies really get tested too. You get to see them on display making those in tight saves, and I also like the fact that if you miss a net, you lose a ball. Right?
You got to be smart.
Yeah.
No, I think it's funny too, because one of the things that I've told parents, and I've tried to assist players getting recruited for numerous years now. Again, feeling old over 20 years, and one of the things I try to tell parents right away is play the game for fun, and if you're an athlete, you're an athlete, right? Like, there is parts of this where coming into the world as an infant, some people are programmed to be, an IQ way smarter than mine, and some people are programmed to be athletic, and so parents just have to be patient. I see it so much in our other national sport, hockey, where parents are really trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and there's just part of this that and then kids don't enjoy it, they don't have fun. I think a lot of what you said, which I posted in the chat, revolves around some of those concepts, right? Like find what's a good fit. Stop, don't force your kids into something that maybe they don't want to be into. Be patient. I think that was good. Why don't we start with Lyndsay? Give me an idea where you're at, what you've got going on. Sounds like you're busy like the rest of us lacrosse people. So fire away, Lyndsay.
Well, I teach high school, so I wasn't as busy this week. I don't have the storied playing career that everyone has. I actually played in the OUA. I'm from Owen Sound, but I lived up north until I was in high school and didn't start playing until I moved down to Owen Sound. I played at Western while I was there, but I actually don't know my title with Team Ontario. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm the director of scouting, recruiting, and player personnel with Team Ontario, but I'm also the U17 head coach, and I'm the director of development for the OWFL. And I'm also a World Lacrosse international official. So that has helped my knowledge of the game immensely.
That's great. Brodie, where are you at? Looks like you're back in Orangeville from your trip to Vancouver.
Yeah. I love the game, and the game is everything to me. And I'd say that one thing I've learned, the more you give into the game and pour into it, the more you're going to get that back in, tenfold. I'm still playing with the San Diego Seals, coaching at the Hill Academy, and in the midst of it's a busy stretch right now. It's a lot of worlds are colliding. I'm just we got our big U9 Orangeville Northmen tryouts next week. So a lot of lacrosse going on, and feel really fortunate, and to work with great people like yourself, and all the great people that are in this game.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate both your time. I know that schedules are crazy. One of the things I love about the lacrosse world is that people will give back to help each other out, especially in Canada. I find that we're a pretty open book on across the country on helping. Outside of maybe Kurt Moloski, sometimes will hide his power play plays. Anyways, I really appreciate everybody's time. And I think just some of the points I picked out of here will go a long way in even me kind of revamping some of the way I approach the recruiting model out here. Best of luck to everybody. And remember, next week we have our final session. I don't even remember what the session is right now because I'm so ingrained in this one. But Wendy, can you jump on and re-enlighten me? My head's in the recruiting world right now. I'm all over the. I'm just gonna go push my kids now to get out in the backyard and try to get some film. Putting Wendy on the spot.
I just had to pull it up. We have Matt Brown and Darren Fridge next week.
Yeah, so a couple of Canadian legends, Matt Brown from Denver, a school that we were just talking about some of the concepts in lacrosse, and Darren Fridge, one of the writers of the box lacrosse manuals, a couple of great lacrosse minds next week. It'll be our last session. It's been a great month. Thank you, Lyndsay and Brodie. Good to see you guys, and thanks for everything for everybody jumping on tonight. Have a great Sunday night.
Thanks, guys. Take care.